Achievement Gap by Jody Eagar. What is an achievement gap? The achievement gap refers to the disparity of achievement between various student groups. The gap exists especially between groups that differ in socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, and gender. What did you know prior to this class? I didn't know much about achievement gaps. I knew that most low-income schools didn't have many resources as other schools that are in the middle and upper middle class areas. One thing that surprised me from this week's reading was in the article, Closing the Achievement Gap. The author wrote about how New York public schools would include special education students in tracking the achievement gap. Some of the main causes for achievement gaps are limited family support, lack of resources and materials, low expectations for student achievement. Effects from the achievement gap. Title I schools versus upper middle class. When I was student teaching in the Gilbert Public Schools, I noticed that all of these students had access to computers. There were computers for every classroom, and if it wasn't every classroom, it was every grade level. They also had books. They had books for all the students, plus they even had extra books for students to take home if they needed to complete their homework. Also, the teachers had many handouts that they were allowed to make as many copies as they needed for their classroom. When I was in the when I worked in the Title I school in Mesa, Arizona, they only had computers 2 or 3 per classroom. And then the books that they had, sometimes they had books for all of the students, sometimes they didn't, depending upon the subject. And also, the teachers were only allowed so many handouts that they could make. At some point, the teachers would have to pay for the paper out of their own pocket if they made too many. Also, when it came to testing, in the Gilbert Public Schools, they actually had employees that tracked all of the testing for the school. And the schools in Gilbert tested on a monthly basis to know where their scores were. In the Title I school in Mesa, they only had one Title I specialist who helped try to track all the testing, but the teachers were solely responsible for that. And when the Title I specialist was tracking the testing, she was usually a month or 2 behind because she had to do this for the whole entire school. My proposed solution to closing the achievement gap would consist of constant intervention for students, which would include before and after school tutoring, lower level classes for struggling students, and more engaging lessons for the students. Implementing the solution. The apparent solution would be money, which would consist of more government funding for low-income schools and taxes for funding, such as like passing a bond. When I was in the Gilbert Public Schools, they actually had passed a very large bond for the schools, and the taxpayers actually agreed to doing something like that. Another idea would be giving teachers like incentives for having tutoring and for higher test scores. And this incentive would be money-based. Okay. One major obstacle that would be present is government bureaucracy. The waiting to receive funds for a project and even the approval for a project. Also, there there could possibly be negative people in the community that would not want to pay taxes for these type of programs. My hope for this proposed solution would be to have higher test scores in all subjects. This would include all racial backgrounds that are within each school, including special education. Why is this important to you and your community? By having higher performing schools, this gives the students a higher perspective when it comes to education. It will show the students that education is important and anyone can succeed in school.